Alrighty, here we go. It is a brand new Flyers Daily for the 7th of January, 2025. Flyers Daily, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers back home tonight, finally. They haven't played a home game since all the way back on December 21st against the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's incredible. It's been a while, and they'll be back at it tonight. The back half, the second game of a home and home with the Toronto Maple Leafs. By the way, Max Domi, I mentioned this on yesterday's pod, talked about it on postgame as well. Bill and I discussed this. Max Domi got the maximum allowed under NHL policy, a $5,000 fine from the Department of Player Safety for that elbow, 2 elbows, not just one, but 2 on Garnet Hathaway. Thought that was a dirty play. They agreed. I'm not usually a guy that kind of screams and yells about that kind of stuff, but I don't like seeing elbows being thrown. We'll see what gets thrown tonight, though, between the Flyers and the Leafs. There was a little bit of scar tissue in that game. Teams getting after it. It was physical. And how that's going to translate in the second game of a home and home is always why it's intriguing having 2 straight games against a different opponent in different buildings. So Flyers and Leafs tonight, and all the same things hold true that held true for the game this weekend. That you don't want to put the Leafs on the power play. You have to know when Austin Matthews is on the ice. Nylander, Tavares, Marner, I thought was great in that game. And you got to keep attacking the Leaf goal like they did in the game the other night. They were all over the blue paint, attacking in the middle and down low. Got to continue to do that. They only got 2 goals out of it. Give them credit because good goaltending. Look, they only scored 2 in regulation too, and they attacked the Flyers blue paint. So Flyers got to continue to do those things. Start off this 4-game homestand with a win over the Leafs. It's the Leafs tonight. Thursday, it's going to be the Dallas Stars on Ed Snyder Legacy Night. Saturday, it's going to be the Anaheim Ducks and the first game for Cutter Gauthier as a member of the Ducks coming back to Philadelphia. Well, was he ever really in Philadelphia? And Florida on Monday the 13th, a week from yesterday, will wrap up the 4-game homestand. Then they're going to head on the road to Columbus, the Islanders, Jersey, and then come back home for Detroit. Go to New York to take on the Rangers and the Islanders, back home for a home and home with New Jersey, and then they'll wrap up the month at home with the Islanders. Really important month of hockey, 15 games in the month of January for the Flyers. If they're going to get into position, this is the month to do it. Got to get into position. We'll see how this month kind of, when we look back at the end of the season, what this month did. Did it solidify their position? Did they tread water and kind of just stay on the border, or did they fall out of it in the month of January? All those things could be answered between now and the 30th when the Flyers play the Islanders. Now, here's what we're going to do for this episode. I thought it was a good opportunity to clean out the inboxes. Every once in a while, you got to clean them out. So we got some emails and we got some DMs from Flyer fans that I want to get to in this episode. We start with this one from Mike Evangelista. He sent this the other day. He's a great pod touching on coaching. And he said, this has been my thinking all along with Torts and his contract. I believe he was brought in to sort of lay the foundation for the room and the culture for the next guy to win. I don't know his contract status. He has 1 more year after this. So there's that info. But he said, I was wondering and often felt like Mike Sullivan could come and take the reins and Torts would move into a front office role. Thanks. And this goes without saying, but I'm pulling and praying for you. I appreciate that, Mike. Well, first of all, Mike Sullivan's still employed. If Mike Sullivan were available, would that be an option? I don't know. Bringing a coach in on the final year of his deal, I think you need to extend that coach because you lose a lot of your power when all the players know that you're in the final year of your deal. So I think you got to either extend that or you have the handoff to someone else. Could Torts move into a front office role? I could see him being an advisor for the team for many years. I don't know where this is going to go. When it comes to coaches and people say, well, they need to fire this guy or get rid of him, I say, well, if not him, who? It's easy to say get rid of a guy, but who replaces him? I don't think the Flyers are in any position to just go, okay, let's move on and we'll find. No, you got to find the right guy. And I think that part of this is up to Torts too. Does he want to continue coaching? And, he has said this is his last job. I do think he was brought in to reapply a standard in Philadelphia, a culture, to get that room right. But there's a lot of variables here. One of the things I was listening to 32 Thoughts that Elliot Friedman and Kyle Bukowskis brought up was that David Carl, who just won a second straight World Juniors with Team USA, and all the success he's had at the collegiate level, teams will be knocking down his door. I wonder, would the Flyers be interested in David Carl? Do they want to go with a coach that doesn't have NHL experience? Now, there was a connection to David Carl. Danny Briere played with Matt Carl, David Carl's brother. It's not a great connection, but it's a connection. So do they want to go that route, or do they want to go if a guy like Mike Sullivan's available, a guy that has coached in the NHL, had success to some degree, and go with that? I don't know I really don't know what the preference is for the Flyers when it comes to that. So we'll see. But it's an interesting thing to kind of theorize about for sure, because it's an important element, whether John Tortorella extends and stays longer, or John Tortorella moves on into an advisory role or whatever it is, front office. Who's the next guy? It's a huge, huge element. I got this one from Simon Costigan. He said, hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Happy New Year. Sorry about your diagnosis. I'm confident you'll punch it square in the face, which I will. He said, could I submit an Ask Billy question? Sorry, Bill's not here today, but one thing the Flyers have been this season is consistently inconsistent. Yeah, they have been. And sit just below Hockey 500. Do you believe the month of January will define their playoff chances? Thanks for the great daily content. I never miss an episode. Cheers, Simon. Yeah, I think this month is either you know what or get off the pot for the Flyers. A lot of games, a very light February with the Four Nations. March is going to be busy. You're up against it then. You have the deadline, and obviously you're coming down to it then, and things are really tight. I think this is the month that when it's all said and done on the 30th, we'll say, okay, they're in it. They got a chance if they can close it out, or they're right there, or we'll know. I think it'll be pretty obvious. We either know one way or another whether they're likely to be a playoff team. I don't think there'll be a lot of, I guess, ambiguity around that. All right, let's get to this one from John, who messages in. John says, Happy New Year, Jason. Happy New Year to you, John, and everybody else. I hope you kick cancer's ass. I wanted to chime in on the fans claim that the rebuild is a failure. There was a guy that tweeted me that the other day. Rebuild's a total failure, which I thought was interesting because Danny Briere and Keith Jones are about a year and a half into this rebuild. Under their watch, they have 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, 6 picks in the top 45. They've jettisoned off several players that aren't long-term players. Not all of them, but several. Ivan Provorov, Kevin Hayes, Tony DeAngelo, amongst others. So they have done some things. He said, I need to see more from players like Farabee, Forster, Frost, and even Tippett. I think he might have sent this right before Forster had back-to-back games with goals. But I digress. You drafted or acquired Tippett, and I can't say I'm sold on any of those players mentioned yet. While at points they have looked good, I need them to start playing like first-round picks on a more consistent basis. I've been very patient, but my patience is wearing thin. Well, that's going to happen. And I get why, especially when I hear Keith Jones say, we want to be playing for Stanley Cups consistently, and we're still in the middle of the rebuild. That's great, but at some point you need to make the playoffs to get to a level of being a cup contender. I know there's still players coming to hopefully make a difference, Barkey, Bonk, Lutsenko. And yes, they cannot sign players that would help make a difference right now due to cap constraints. However, I want to see progress. And at times they look like they are regressing, not progressing. I just want to watch hockey in April, May, and June, where my stomach is in knots like back in 2009-10. Again, I hope you're headed in the right direction with your health. Thanks for doing what you do. John, thanks for the note. The players you mentioned, Farabee, Forster, Frost, and Tippett. There's elements of these players that I think has developed, and there's still more developing to be done to varying degrees on these players. Farabee's a guy that's had 2 20-goal seasons. I know that he is struggling offensively this year. There was a guy who tweeted me the other day and said that I would give Farabee away for a 6th-round pick, and I said, you're an idiot. This is a guy who scored 20 goals twice in the NHL, did it once in 55 games. Not only that, dude plays every game. He hasn't missed a game in 3 years, and that's coming off the same surgery that Jack Eichel had. So, look, availability matters. But again, Farabee needs to just get his touch back, get his confidence back. I don't think that Joel Farabee all of a sudden is not going to be capable of scoring goals in the NHL anymore. Sometimes you have a season that things don't go in your favor. They don't work out, and you bounce back. He's got two 20 goal seasons already, and he's a guy that I think will have multiple 20 to 25 goal seasons. If you can score 20 goals in 55 games in your second year in the league, and now you're only, 5 years in, I don't think you lose that like that. Doesn't work like that for me. So, and I'm certainly not trading Farabee now when his value is depressed. You know who is a great example of that is Rasmus Ristolainen. When everybody said, oh, the Flyers need to trade Ristolainen, just retain half of it. Well, look how well he's playing now. If you trade him now, you're not retaining anything. You're not going to. And you might get something decent in return. That's why you don't trade guys at their weakest value. You try and build up their value. And if they get their game moving in the right direction and they build up their value enough, you got two options. You got a high value piece that you can trade and get a good return on, or if that player's playing good and he fits your timeline and fits your culture and fits your cap situation, then why trade him? So that's part of it. Forster, he gets off, like this year, he got off to a very inconsistent start. Didn't look like Tyson Forster of last year, even defending. But lately, dude's got 12 goals. He's on pace for 25, 26 goals this season. And he is steaming right now. He's getting hot. He's found a good line with Noah Cates and Bobby Brink. I thought this was a big year, a stepping stone year for Forster. This second half of the season will be a big one for him. Flyers will play their last game of the first half tonight, game 41. Frost, a whole different story. This has been this wild roller coaster ride with Morgan Frost, finding consistent high level of play. We see it. We see that talent there at times. He's in and out of the lineup. I don't even know where you go right there now. That's an assessment for the end of the year for me. You got to figure out what you're doing there. And if you're going to bring in a top center, however you're going to get him, whether you try and trade for Elias Peterson, whatever it is, trade, whatever. Where does he fit in that equation? Sean Couturier is not going anywhere. Jet Lachenko's a guy that's going to play in the middle. To me, he's a middle six winger or center, Lachenko. Couturier's in that area as well. So is Frost a top line center? You got to answer those questions. As far as Tippett goes, Tippett's a guy that's going to drive people crazy at times because he's so insanely talented. But sometimes he just can't find the back of the net. Sometimes he can't hit the net. But he is an incredibly talented guy. And I think with Tippett especially is that when you have a team that's a legit team, playoff team, can do some damage, the way that these players will slot in that team is what helps them as well. Sometimes we're asking guys to be the top guy when maybe that's not where they should be. Maybe they should be the second alternative on a second line and get a slightly better matchup from the team's opposition defenders. And that would help. I think that might be the case with Owen Tippett. He can make unbelievable plays, and we've seen it for sure. Just, I don't know if he'll ever leave everybody satiated enough where they don't feel like there could be more because there's so much talent there. There's just so much there. Thanks for the email to John. Appreciate it. Let's get to this email from Patrick. He says, hey, Jason, yada, yada, great show. You got me through COVID and we're climbing the rebuild, the hill together. I just want to try and squeeze and ask Billy a question. Again, Bill's not here today, but he said, but first, you've got a whole big community right beside you on your healthcare fight. Thank you. You guys are awesome. He said, question, what are your thoughts on sending Coley to Lehigh Valley and going forward with Cal Peterson as the third? We're in a rebuild. Doesn't it make sense to develop Kolosov the right way? Well, right now, if you send Coley to the Phantoms, Cal Peterson's your backup because Sam Arison's not available. And I don't know what the availability or health will be for Arison going forward. I do think Kolosov would greatly benefit for some time with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I do. I think it would be more unforgiving. It could help build confidence, all while getting the same elements he gets in the NHL of playing the North American game. And I'm not bringing Cal Peterson up and sending Kolosov down because I think Cal Peterson's a better option for the Flyers, because I don't. But I do believe the best thing right now would be for Kolosov to go down. And if Sam Arison comes back during this homestand, I'd say you keep up Arison and Fedotov and send Kolosov down. Have him play a good amount of games down there. See how he pulls things together and find some consistency, and you can bring him back up. There's no rule saying you can't bring him back up, so you can do that too. So appreciate the email from Portland. Patrick, thank you. This one comes from Jeff Kirsch. He says, hey, Jason, Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well, kicking the crap out of cancer. I know I speak for so many. We're rooting for you and sending you strength to win this battle. Love it. Thank you. You said you recently mentioned a few times that Brian Smith always says expected by who when I bring up the concept of expected goals. He said, well, I know that there are different public models and that teams have their own models. The story is very consistent across the public models, but the Flyers have the worst mark when it comes to that metric. With that, two questions. Do either of this was for me and Bill. I should have got these to Bill. Do either of you share Brian's skepticism on the value of the expected goals metric? He said, I think the concept is fairly simple. And while the models may vary a bit, it's a great stat. As an aside, baseball also has embraced the idea with their expected ERA and expected batting average. Look, expected goals, again, some websites have different criteria. There's a guy that runs an analytics company that I really believe in, that I get a lot of data from, both from him and Kevin Woodley, and that's Steve Valiquette. He's one of the analysts for the New York Rangers, or MSG, and he's got a company called ClearSight Analytics. Valley was a former NHL goalie. We had him on the podcast before, and he talked about it. His numbers are very well researched, so I do buy into those. Some of them, I'm not exactly sure how they measure it and who's calculating it. You know, is it just some guy at home on TV watching? How do they calculate it? It's a big part of it. Sometimes they come up with expected goals based on location, and location is not as important as traffic or environment, those things. So I buy into it to a degree. Some of them I need to know more about. Jeff also said, do you think there's a risk that the subpar, to put it mildly, goaltending this year might damage the culture that Torts in the front office are trying so hard to build as a foundation for the future? Yeah, because it affects outcome. You know, I don't think this locker room is going to turn on each other. But when you get continual bad outcomes, it always has an effect in the season. Is it something that'll sink them? No, I don't think so. But it will have an effect on them, because no athlete, no competitor can handle losing. It's not about winning. It's about not being able to handle losing. When I played sports, to me, winning was great. But the best thing about winning was that I didn't lose. Losing hurt way more than I enjoyed winning. So that's what it was for me. Great email, Jeff. Thank you very much. All right, Flyers Leafs tonight. We'll break it down tomorrow. Join us then on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.